Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to the American Scouser TV's post-match extravaganza. This is a little bit of post-match. This is a little bit of New Year's Day's comeuppance, and more importantly, this is the version of the Monday Night Podcast. So if you normally tune in to myself, to Muchin and Bickler, no, you will not be finding any of the three of us here at 8 o'clock tonight because, well, we could only do so much to get through today's match. Timuchin is somewhere gallivanting right now with Kazi in Las Vegas on their way out of the supporters club there. And I'm sure he is working his way back towards the strip and probably towards some fine ass dinner. Going to be a lot better than what I eat tonight. But I am joined by Maka. Speaking of eating, at dinner time, I am very happy that you were able to pass on a little bit of the early dinner.
I'm getting sushi, so that doesn't go cold. So I'm good.
You're good there, right? You don't have to worry about it going cold. So I'd say we don't have to worry about a performance like today going cold. There were definitely some things in today's match that can be improved upon, some things that can be dissected. All in all, I would say this was an entertaining match. For a neutral, it was everything Liverpool Newcastle always is, right? Wonderful, fun, and there's goals. At times, nervy, frustrating. We had our arguments, I think, in the Discord. But even some of the guys that might have let us down or made us nerve-wracky today, at the end, there really wasn't a terrible performance put in by anyone, was there, Maka?
No, I mean, like, it would be nice. I think if we think about what we talked about, let's say just Nunez before the game, I think that was just a perfect example of what we were saying. He did so many great things that really annoyed the hell out of Newcastle, and they didn't know how to handle it. And then he gets a 1v1 with the goalkeeper and then fluffs it. That's the yin and yang of Darwin Nunez. And I certainly wouldn't want them to go. I like having them at the club. My frustration, as I said before, is just if you could just get those goals, nobody would talk about Erling Haaland at all. It would be all Nunez because Erling Haaland doesn't do anything but score goals. He doesn't really contribute anywhere else for the Man City team, and that's by design. That's what they let all the other players do it. But I can't think. Maybe Joba's life was a little bit sloppy with his passing in the first half. I thought Gomez was phenomenal for a non-left back. I thought he was excellent. Endo was excellent. Salah fluffed the penalty, but he's bound to do that at some point every season. There's always one. I thought Jones was superb, like absolutely superb, and I don't think we need to go beyond buying any more players to replace Steven Gerrard. I think we mentioned that in the Discord. He's there. His name is Curtis Jones. He is the new Gerrard. He has everything except for maybe that talismanic aura about him that Gerrard had in terms of his personality. But he does everything else. He's just phenomenal. Keeper was great. Back two were great. Like, there's nothing to complain about.
It really was a hard one. I mean, it would be a tough one. If you wanted to come on here and complain, and we do. We want your opinion. So get them in. Brian Shelton jumps in. I'll refrain from the Nunez comments. I mean, if you want to complain about a player,
that's only because we have Thursday to look forward to.
And I get it. He has plenty of time between now and Thursday to refrain. I mean, if you really rewatch the actual play, he should score. Don't get me wrong, but Dubravka actually makes a really good, smart save with his leg. He gets down really well low there in the 1v1. In that instance, Nunez actually takes it pretty wide of him. It wasn't like he kicked it. A lot of times when he's 1v1, I feel like he goes right at the keeper. I actually thought in this one, he got his body right. The keeper makes a great save. I thought in the goal that he's offsides by inches. So it's not even one where we can be mad at him for being lazy and looking down the line. I thought it was a perfect run on the ball and that he actually used his body and his movement perfectly to set Diaz up. And he actually passed the ball, which normally we'd all be criticizing him for not making the pass. And then he does square the ball when he could have shot it to set Mo up for the first goal. So once again, even in the first half, like the announcers are criticizing him for missing the little fluff over the top. It's a nice little dink finish. He almost makes the nice finish. Like, if this is anyone else, like in the second half, when Isak buries the goal, Jim Beglin uses that opportunity to basically take away from Isak's moment of brilliance, to basically talk about if Darwin had just finished a play like that in the first half. Like, I feel at this point, it doesn't matter. Some fickle supporters, the match day commentators, the halftime announcers, all they want to do is talk about him missing. It's all they do. They don't talk about any of the good stuff he does. I almost feel like he can't win at this point. But to your point, you talk about Holland, he does nothing but finish those goals. And I get it. You want that. But we've never had that type of a poacher striker for a long time. Like, I find it funny that people say things like, Darwin Nunez was brought here to score goals. He's our number 9. Yet for 3 years, when I said Bobby didn't score enough goals through the center of the pitch when we needed goals, all anyone told me was we don't want our number 9 to score goals. If he does everything else and brings other players in, and I'm not comparing Bobby and Darwin. My point is supporters use opportunities to make their arguments. So I want to kind of shift to one of those arguments, because Bickler and I, normal, par for the course, found ourselves embroiled in a Facebook argument with random ass supporters because we were both critical of the idea that Salah should never take another penalty for the club again after missing in the first half. So I have to ask you, it was a dreadful penalty. Maka, I'm excited that we're going to get 5 weeks of no Mo Salah, only because when we get penalties, I am interested to see who takes them. Because I think McAllister, Szoboszlai, and Nunez have an argument that they should get the next penalty that comes up. They've all made them for other clubs. They're very good at them. Where are you at in the Mo Salah penalty-taking hierarchy at Liverpool right now, based on the fact that he has missed 4 of his last 9?
Well, I'm old school. So when I was coming up and playing the game as a young, slightly less chubby Maka, the fullbacks took the penalties. That was always the way. The fullbacks, left back and the right back, took the penalties. So I'd be interested to see Trent actually taking penalties, because I think he could be a good penalty taker. I don't know enough about Szoboszlai and McAllister's penalty taking abilities. I could see Nunez taking them. But I'd be interested to see for Trent, just for nothing else, his confidence to get some goals on the score sheet, like outside of trying to perform some sort of magic. But yeah, I think if we rely on Salah all the time, and if he's the main focal point, it kind of adds to the thing of, if we don't have Salah, we don't have anything. And you don't want your team to think like that. You want to have variety. Which was the great thing about Milner. When Milner was here, he was a penalty taker, and he was a very reliable penalty taker. So you knew, if Salah's having a bad game in front of goal, maybe he's not going to put the penalty away. But if you could shift it to somebody else, that's an opening that you don't have to have that hoodoo in that moment. Like, is he going to score? He's going to flip this one too. Oh, he did. Now his confidence is on the floor. So I would look to see something else, but I would go for Trent. I'm just old school like that. The fullbacks always took the penalties, but Jim Beglin being one of them, I believe, if one of them, if memory serves.
I don't hate the idea of Trent taking the penalties, other than the fact that I've seen the way he's kicked the ball from roughly the penalty spot over the last 2 matches, and he's kicked the ball about 20 yards over the top, both against Arsenal on the run and today. I mean, off Mo's miss, that was as bad of a miss from him there. John jumps in. What a way to start the new year. Best game for Luis Diaz in quite some time, and finally drinking the Jones is our best midfielder Kool-Aid. Hugely entertaining game, and what a win. We're going to get to Jones more because Maka picked up on something. I think I was the one who laid down in the Discord channel right at the end of the match. And I know it's hard for John because he is, of the Gravenberch, is the silkiest and best player ever. I almost want to raise my hand as usual and say I'm going to be like the mush, because I feel like I've hampered Gravenberch's plight into his greatness as a Liverpool player, because I was the one who acknowledged that he reminded me of Pogba, and I actually said not the pompous prick who has like bad hair and looks like he's disinterested, but the guy who looks like he does everything so effortlessly on the pitch and he kind of glides around, yet he's so strong and powerful, almost like he's so good, he's arrogantly puts himself in positions to let him and his teammates down, which is basically a definition of Paul Pogba's entire playing career. And I'm starting more and more as I watch Gravenberch play and turn the ball over in bad spots. I think to myself, wow, that's something I would have made fun of the Paul Pogba playing for United doing. And he almost looks like him on the pitch. I want to get back to Jones in a little bit, but before we get to Jones, I want to stay on this Mo and the penalties thing. For you as a former coach, supporter of a long time, and lover of this game, what bothers me about the fickleness of supporters, fans, fanatics, whatever you want to call them, is how quickly they jump off of the train, right? Like, they're so quick to jump on the train when things are going good. Like, yes, Mo has missed four of his last 9 penalties taken for Liverpool. He's also made 22 of his 26 penalties taken for Liverpool. Like, I think that's what bothers me. Like, I think when you make a move like to take penalties off your striker and your talisman, I think it sends a bigger message throughout the club. And Mo seems like a player I wouldn't want to adjust or hinder his confidence or where he feels he is stature-wise at the club. Am I overthinking this? Like, it seems to me like Mo might be the type of guy where if you took penalties off him, it wouldn't matter if Szoboszlai made 7 in a row. In the back of his mind, every time he scored a goal, he'd be thinking that was a goal he should have scored.
Yeah, it's quite possible. I do agree. I mean, if you can kind of look, let's go back to let's say Robbie Fowler, and when Gerard Houllier decided he wasn't preparing himself well enough for games and took him out, like his confidence just dropped. I mean, Michael Owen was there already taking over, so that must have hurt even more. So I think for strikers more than, and maybe goalkeepers at the other end, because they are judged on discrete moments more than the rest of the team positions are. It really is a confidence game. So what I think helps us here is the fact that he has to go to the African Cup of Nations. He's not, it's not like we're going to take penalties off him and then he's going to watch other people take penalties. And as you say, he starts to second guess himself. We need another penalty taker because he's not here. So if we get somebody else, maybe the intelligent solution then would be Mo still the penalty taker. But if he's not feeling it that day, here you go, McAllister, you take this one for me. So it becomes his choice rather than something taken away. But I do agree, confidence is such a huge thing for that position and for goal scorers in general. That we frequently talk about, this player just needs one that goes off his backside and his confidence will fly up and the goals will flow. But we never think of the opposite end of that. Taking goals away from the striker might actually also, do the opposite. It might crush their confidence. And doing that, that's what you're doing with a penalty. I believe the statistic is 75% chance of scoring every penalty. So if you take that guaranteed, who knows how he comes back from the African nations. Maybe Egypt doesn't play so well. Maybe he misses a few chances because he's with lesser players, and he comes back thinking, "Oh, I hope I don't bring this with me to Liverpool." Maybe he fluffs his first shot. A penalty would be the ideal way. Hit that one in, we're golden again. But if you take it off him, he doesn't have that opportunity. So I think it's delicate, and that's where man management comes into it. Where that's the art of it. We know we need a second penalty taker, but how we negotiate that politically with the main one is where Klopp earns his corner, I think.
Sadu, good friend of the program, says hello, and a very interesting match. We won it perfectly. I don't disagree. Hassan jumps in. Our players are in sync now, and they really playing well together today. If it was not raining that much and playing on saturated pitch, we would have scored a load more goals. I don't disagree that the weather actually had a little bit to do with how the match was played today. Um, I don't want to make this a Nunez referendum because I feel like we're going to get to ratings in a minute and we're going to see that Nunez actually statistically had a great match, actually. But it's high time that Nunez should start from the bench. Henceforth, I'd argue that Gakpo bundles one in off his knee. And other than that, he was invisible other than turning the ball over for 25 minutes consecutively after coming on the pitch. So it's funny, right? Like some matches, guys look great and score a goal. Some matches, guys do nothing, miss a penalty, and also score a goal, get a couple assists. Like there is just a complete difference here. But I think what we do see is things like, what Serzi is saying here. I feel for Nunez. He really does everything but score. Today's a prime example of that. He did everything today but score. He pressed. He played well. He linked up. He created opportunities. He got a big assist for the first goal. And really, I don't even kill him for the miss as much 1v1 with the keeper because I think Dubravka does well to get low and get down and make a save. The one I kill him on, if you want to get critical, he needs to score with the last touch he gets. He gets that header. I've always said Bickler was spot on about this. He's weak in the air. If you ask me, the number one place he needs to get better at is you watch him standing next to Kanate on a corner, and he's taller than Kanate. Like, he needs to be dominant in the air. And that does come with age and strength and getting more confident. But there were a few times today on headers I wished he had put the ball on frame. Those were my bigger disappointments. The times he kicked, I thought he was really good today, actually. Like, I thought his interplay was good today. I just think he could be better in the air. And I think those are those situational pieces, Maka, where I do agree with you, where he needs to just learn to take his chances, take his header, because then that's how you become world class. Because all the other things you do for 90 minutes make you better than most strikers who can just score a goal. And we know he has a worldie or a flick or a trick in him. It's just scoring the gimmies. And when he gets those, I think it all changes. But again, I don't want to spend a whole show talking about Darwin's shortcomings on a day where it was really, really overall a good performance. So we're just going to have poltergeist here. If we take a look here at some of these Manchester United fan says, laugh out loud. These get so lucky. I don't really know exactly what Manchester United fan is actually saying here, but we welcome your bullshit opinions onto this program as well. So if what you're saying is we got lucky, we will be lucky a good 17 points ahead of where you are. And we love the banter, and we love the banter club. You can join this banter anytime you want, or you can join any of those United shows, which is really more like a funeral. So let's go back to looking at some of the performances from today.
But before to kind of end the Nunez thing, I think we're also forgetting the Newcastle keeper had a great game. He had if it wasn't for him, that's a 7-0 game easily. He did a great game. And the other thing for Nunez, the height, the heading thing, I found a lot of the time that when you get tall players, like players that are tall as kids, there's too much time spent drilling them to be good ball players on the ground and not enough time taking advantage of their physical advantage and teaching them how to be good headers of the ball, which is the complete 180 of what used to be when I was growing up, where tall players they'd be taken off to the side and cross after cross after cross was put in until they learned how to be good headers. So he's probably a victim of that a little bit as well. And I think you're right that you won't see good heading from Nunez until he's a lot older and has a lot more practice at it. Even at his age and stage of development, but that I think let's just remember that the Newcastle goalkeeper was probably their man of the match by country miles.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think there was a period when it was like 2-1. You could have argued that Dubravka was going to be the man of the match at that point. By the time we win it with 4 goals scored, I think it's hard to give it to a keeper. But I absolutely agree. I think when you look at, some of this ratings, and we're not going to worry too much about the Newcastle side of things, but, Mo is very good. Obviously, missed the penalty, made the penalty, got an assist, ended up with 2 goals. Nunez gets his assist. Diaz was really, really bright throughout the whole match. Created and was took players on, brought players into the play. Like I just thought it was one of his best matches, in my opinion, in a really long time. And then, of course, we talked about Jones's overall play. I think it's a little harsh to basically say like Gomez, Van Dijk, and Konate weren't good, and Allison. I think that just comes to the fact that they conceded 2 goals without Newcastle having much possession. So they use these statistical anomalies to create these ratings. But let's just take a second, and I know it won't, it by no means is difficult for you to spend some time talking about what Endo is bringing right now. I am so upset that he is the captain of Japan and that Japan is going to go deep into this tournament, because it's the absolute worst time. Do you realize, let me give you a stat, Maka, that I think you're going to love. And I know you've been calling for this, and this is one of those ones where I hope Bickler is still sober enough watching the Michigan-Alabama game, regardless of what that score is of that game. And it's only 45 minutes in, but anyone who knows Bickler knows his stress levels for Michigan tonight is enough that he is probably already in full force lube factor. Another fellow Endo supporter, maybe even apologist, let's be real, right? Before the folks came around. In the last 5 matches that Endo has started, Liverpool have conceded 7 total shots on target. And people say, like, well, what does that have to do with anything? It has a lot to do when your 2 center backs are absolutely comfortable in where they're going to be at all times, even with your tucked in inverted right wing back, because it means they know that the defensive number 6 right in front of them is going to do the job. And I think the fact that we've seen those numbers, 7 shots in 5 matches, and 3 of them were today, and 2 of them went in. That is pretty crazy, right? Like, to me, that speaks to the fact that Endo has finally kind of figured out his role in this side. And I think it also makes sense to me that the center backs have genuinely gravitated to being more comfortable with him there. Am I overstating this, or do you think this has to do with Endo's defensive abilities in the middle of the pitch?
I think it's structural as much as anything else. Every team I have coached that has done well has always had like a good number 6. Occasionally it's a player who was not maybe the best technical player, but was feisty and could get a tackle in. So that's where they went. Because again, I grew up in the 1980s. I played in the 1980s in Ireland. Jack Charlton was the Ireland manager. I love Jack Charlton to bits. I love the style of play. I love that long ball game. But it was based on the basics of the game, which is protect your back 4 first. Protect your 2 central defenders. If you have that little triangle, you're on a good pathway. Gerard Houllier, when he came in, I remember reading a thing about him. One of his first speeches as a technical director for the French Football Federation was that you have to have a square base, which is your 2 centre halves and your 2 central mids. You have to protect the 2 centre halves. We don't get that with McAllister because he's not a true number 6. He's more of a Xabi Alonso deep line playmaker type if he's anything. But Endo he's like Lucas Leiva, as I said before. He just wants to go and do the basic position. He's anchoring that midfield. When the 2 central defenders split, he's dropping in between them to become that extra player so that if Kanate or Virgil move up, he's there covering them, which McAllister doesn't always do, which is where we lose out a lot of the time. And he just makes himself available either for a pass or for to stop a counter-attack. And that structure, I mean, it doesn't have to be Endo, but it just has to be somebody who appreciates that job. He does that so well that people don't recognize it. Just the way people didn't recognize how good Lucas was in that position until he got injured on his cruise ship. Then we had Charlie Adam in there, and that was hopeless. You don't recognize these players until they're gone. And I think you're right, because he's the captain of Japan and because they're probably going to go far, we may actually end up understanding how well he's been doing the job in the last, 5, 6, 7 games.
I find it's always easy to figure out that you don't have real quality when your replacement is Charlie Adams. That usually is a good opportunity to figure out that your backup isn't good enough. Speaking of backups that aren't good enough, Manchester United fan wants to jump back in, and we read all comments here on the American Scouser programs, but can't wait until these lot bottle it. And I got to tell you, maybe it'll happen, my man, or my female friend. Maybe they will bottle it. Here's the thing. You have to be close to the title to bottle it. You have to be close to relevance to be important enough that anyone actually cares. And ultimately, what it comes down to is we'll always read these comments, but you're rooting for Manchester City to win the league. Because if you think we're going to bottle it, then only City's going to win it. So maybe you chalk it up to oil money, and you'd rather hang out with winners in your own neighborhood as in your backyard. But at the end of the day, you should probably really worry about your own club. We are absolutely here for you to view our programming, hang out with us, and comment in our chats. We appreciate it because we love to live rent-free in all of your little domes. And that's what they are. Little, minute, spaceless, brainless domes. All right.
I just want to point out, if he or she is a Man United fan in England, they're probably from London rather than Manchester. All the City fans are from Manchester.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, the City fans are from Manchester, or at least the ones who are still willing to show their colors out in public. Because if I rooted for that team, oof. Sayed jumps in. Am against signing Endo. I will apologize to 40%. But he is 60% reliable DM we need. I think what he's saying is he's not 100% on board, but he understands why it helps. He responds back with that we need a mix of Mascherano and Zabi and a more reliable DM number 6. I want to say this. As much as we started the Gerrard to Jones talk earlier and a little bit of context in our Discord channels, can we stop making every single player of today's day and age a player of the past? Because let's be real, as much as we love the players of the 80s and the 90s, some of those players, as good as they were, because the game has changed and the way talent has changed, speed and play, they wouldn't play in today's setup at today's Liverpool. That doesn't mean they're not Liverpool legends. They're not Liverpool great players. But this whole comparing of generations in whatever sport you want to do it in, it actually doesn't really make any sense. So just embrace the team that we have today and just focus on them, in my opinion. Am I way off here, Maka? Because you have a few years on me, and I always feel like the whole comparing players of different eras makes absolutely no sense because the game changed and we wouldn't know what that player would look like in today's game.
I don't know, because if we do that, then I might be able to say that Joe Gomez is the next Jim Beglin. And what's the point of that anymore?
Well, who wants to do that after listening to that arsehole today on the air all day? But
I think it speaks to something you said earlier on in the podcast, which is basically that supporters are either on the bandwagon or they're off the bandwagon, essentially down to however results. And that's the modern fan. I don't want to go all rosy tinted spectacles, but it wasn't like that when I was a young fan. You took your lumps when your team weren't doing well, but you still supported your team. But I think it's the same thing with strikers for a lot of Liverpool fans and midfielders. For a long time we were so obsessed with Robbie Fowler and getting the new Robbie Fowler, and then every striker was compared to Robbie Fowler. Then it was Torres, and who's going to be because you have this team that's semi-successful, or successful in the short term, and then you want that team to be replicated. And it's no different to any other fan base, because I remember seeing like Leicester fans when Rodgers did a great job with that Leicester team before it collapsed. But when it collapsed, it wasn't, I want that team back again that finished fifth twice. It was, he needs to get a player like Drinkwater. He needs to get a player like Fuchs. He needs to get all these players that are Robert Huth that won the league, because that's what you latch on to. We've just had so many great teams that we have a lot of players that we can latch onto and say X player is the new Y player, or Z player is the new A player. We can do a lot of that, but I think it is essentially like we latch onto our favorite teams. Like I'm still waiting for somebody to be the next Gary McAllister. I want us to sign somebody at 45 years old. Maybe James Milner comes back at 45 years old with a shaved head, becomes the next Gary McAllister. But I think it's just a matter of latching onto the team that you fall in love with and want that replicated over and over again. And it's never going to end, unfortunately.
As I always say, we not only read the opinions of those who agree with us, but those who don't. Imagine paying refs to win football matches. Could never be my club. So we're not even gonna try to understand what that comment actually means, because we all know that there's been zero chance that anyone could say that the referees this season have helped Liverpool Football Club, seeing to the fact that the point in which the only time they've lost in 35 matches in the Premier League, including all of this season, is a match in which two players were sent off, one erroneously, and a goal was chalked off, and we played with 9 men and lost in stoppage time. So I don't even understand exactly what that comment means. Maybe I'm missing it completely. But we do read all comments here.
It's nearly their bedtime anyway. They'll be going to bed soon, whoever they are.
Well, I mean, it's been a long day. He spent all day long. First of all, he spent New Year's Eve in Manchester, which probably lets all of us know that he had a depressing and poor to dismal evening. He woke up this morning, recognized Liverpool was top of the table. He's gotten to the end of day one of the new year, and Liverpool is not only top of the table, they have now extended their lead ahead of United. And then he decided the best thing to do was to tune in to us two blokes gloating about how great Liverpool is. So really, your year can't start off much worse than that.
I mean, I've only got half a shoulder, to be fair, so he's doing better than me already.
So Brian Shelton jumped in with, I'm not sure many of the past players could handle the pace of these matches, let alone the amount of matches they have to play. And this is kind of what I keep coming back to when we talk about these players of yesteryear. And it was easy for Boston Celtics fans, and I live here in New England, and I'm a big basketball fan, so I love the Celtics. But it was easy for Boston Celtics fans to talk about how great all their teams were. Well, it was a lot easier to play basketball when there were 8 total teams in the whole league, and you had 5 of the best 10 players in the world, right? That's basically what the 90s were like when it came to money and talent at United with regards to players. The late 90s, early 2000s, when United just turned the corner, right? It took Arsene Wenger changing football for Arsenal to even make it so United had someone to compete with. And they still only won 3 total titles in 15 years? It if Abramovich never buys football into England and brings his dirty money in before the dirty oil money was really dirty oil money, we'd probably have like 8 or 9 or 10 more United titles, which is the only reason I kind of have looked a blind eye at some of the craziness that happened when it came to spending in England, because it actually balanced the game out. And I think that's really why this could be like the watershed moment, in my opinion, for football in Europe. Is that, yes, there's always going to be the oil monies and the sovereign wealth fund nations. But if more and more clubs can actually start to compete within the channels, you're actually going to have really, really entertaining football. But I wanted to touch on this. I want to move away from today's match. We're going to spend about 20, 30 more minutes here wrapping up the show. This would be our normal 1-hour Monday night podcast that airs 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern every single week. So please tune back in if that is something that you'd be interested in. Today, my friend, marks 6 years to the day that Virgil van Dijk officially became a Liverpool player on January 1st of 2018, after the long, drawn out transfer saga between Southampton and Liverpool that saw Liverpool walk away, etc. To me, I know I was critical end of last season and over the summer whether we would see the best of Virgil van Dijk. I feel like he's not the same player pre-Pickford injury, but it really does feel like he is pretty close at this point. What are your thoughts on what Virgil has meant to this side so far this season? And at his age, do you expect the club to give him another pretty massive contract that it would take to sign him to an extension?
I think he is, again, to completely go against what we said about talking and comparing about teams in the past. But if we go back to Gerard Houlliers' team, which is one of my favourite ones of all time, he wouldn't have had the success he had without buying Sami Hyypiä and Stefan Honcho, but more Sami Hyypiä than anybody else. Brendan Rodgers couldn't figure that part out. He couldn't figure out the talisman centre-half that every good team needs. And Klopp did. He brought in a talisman centre-half, and that's what he was a lightning rod for the other team's attacks. He organised, he was quick, he was strong, and he had winning experience. People downgrade, winning trophies at Celtic or Rangers or something like that, or Benfica or Porto, say in Portugal, but would happily take somebody coming from Bayern Munich, despite the fact that Bayern Munich, for a large part, could put out their under-10s in Germany and probably still win the Bundesliga. But winning is winning. You still have to go through a certain amount of games. You still have to go through the slip-ups, and that will stand you in good stead when you move on to a higher level. So I think Rafa was a big thing for that. He wanted to buy players always who either won a league or were captains of their teams or whatever, because they understood the rigors of competition. So Virgil van Dijk was fantastic in that sense. I think it was a bit comical the way it was drawn out, because we were going to get him anyway. But the fact that we were able to walk away in the first place and say, thanks, but no thanks, we won't be played, was a great thing for the club. It meant we meant business. There was no niceties about it, which is one of the things I love about Klopp. He's quite prepared to be nasty when he needs to be nasty, and that streak is within him. I think you're right. He's not quite the same as he was pre-Pickford injury, but I think what he seems to be doing is figuring out that if he can't be physically there, he can be organisationally there. He's organising a lot more this season than he was last season, and it's almost like he's figured it out that he'll never be as fast as he was before. So now he's getting on people's backs to do their jobs because he needs that little bit of extra cover, and because of that, I would throw whatever money we need to throw at him to keep him, because he may not be the player he was before, but he could groom the next player that will be the next Virgil van Dijk, which I think might be Kwanzaa, actually. Not in style of play, but certainly an impact on the defence. It'll be a sad day when he goes. I think it'll be just as sad as when Sammy Hupia went. It'll be just as sad as when Steven Gerrard went. He's a necessary player for any success we have, as necessary as Becker and as necessary as Salah.
So Sergi has just jumped in with Sobel hamstring injury and confirmed. You could see it as he walked off the pitch. I'm going to go on a two-front little tirade here, and then I'll let you jump in when you're ready. Feel free to cut me off because God knows I might go off on this one a little bit. I'm not surprised to hear that Szoboszlai has an injury because I feel like he's played more minutes than anyone should at a new club so far this season already. And we have criticized Klopp many times for not playing players soon enough, right? Like we talk about how he waits so long to bed players in, and why buy a player now? He won't play till March. You need him in January while Salah's gone, but it doesn't matter. He won't play till March because Klopp makes people wait. And Szoboszlai somehow walked right into his starting lineup. And not only walked into his starting lineup, he walked into every minute of every match in meaningless Europa League matches. You'd be like, he's still playing. When Harvey Elliott is screaming, I should get a start because all I do is score goals, create goals, and make things happen when I play. That said, this is the worst time for him to go down because I genuinely thought he would be a really big component for the time that Mo was gone at AFCON, because I thought, and I've said this before, I think you've actually maybe agreed with me at times, even on some of our shows, that Szoboszlai felt like almost felt like a luxury signing, not like a necessity signing. Like, we can get this guy, so we're going to get this guy. And it was almost like, in case they offer so much that we have to sell that right winger, we have a right winger. But when we sell that right winger, we still have a right winger. Because he never feels like a right mid-sided midfielder in a Jurgen Klopp side to me. He just doesn't look like a guy who does the job. He looks like a guy who should be playing in the front three of a Jurgen Klopp side, creating things, scoring goals. So is it too bad that he goes down during the time that Mo's going to be out? Or in some ways, is it a benefit he goes down so Klopp in some ways is forced to not play him and starts to play some of these other people, like pushing McAllister forward and using Elliott more often in the midfield and actually letting McAllister like blend into where he should be in the side?
See, I think Elliott is the natural replacement for Salah in terms of skill and what he does. Like, Salah's left-footed, Elliott's left-footed. They're not maybe the same level because Salah is Salah. But I think in terms of the structure of the team, having Elliott I think Elliott can do the same thing Salah does, especially with the cut-ins onto his left foot, which means that everybody else doesn't have to change their game to compensate. Whereas Szoboszlai is right-footed, I believe. So he would do things that are right-footed. So we now have to switch everything to Diaz's side because he's a right-footer playing on the left-hand side. So I definitely would be up for the McAllister being pushed into where Szoboszlai is playing right now, seeing what he can do. But he can't, can he? Because we don't have Endo. So he's going to be slopping back there. So it's going to be Jones and Gravenberch, I'd imagine, and then if Szoboszlai's out, then Elliott, or we go Jota, Nunes, and Diaz, and Jota on the right, which I don't think he ever really plays well from. I think he needs to be central more to get the best out of him, or Gakpo, Nunes, and Diaz on the right. It's. I think the best idea would be to have Elliott take Salah's spot. So I think in that sense you're correct. The timing isn't great, but he has been flogged to death. So maybe he needed an injury just to get a rest everywhere else in his body. and his mind. So when he comes back, he might come back. He might be injured at the wrong time, but he might come back at the right time, going into the post-February, post-March games for the run-in, completely rested and ready to, take up from where he left off. So it's probably another yin-yang thing. You're probably right in that it's probably the worst time, given that we're losing Endo and Salah, but he may come back when we need somebody to come back in who's not jaded. Because you're right, Klopp does it's a war of attrition with Klopp in terms of how many minutes you're going to play. And sometimes it is that you get injured in order to get a rest. But of all the areas of the field, defence, midfield, attack, midfield is probably the one where we can afford a little bit to be having a player out. I just hope it's not a huge injury. It's not like a grade 3 hamstring. It's just like something that he's out for a few weeks for.
So look here on the screen, we're looking at the table live as of now. Obviously, we have the game in hand over City. So City sits third on 40 points with the ability to get the win over Brentford, which would bring them to 43 points, jump them into second place above Aston Villa after 20 matches, and leave them just behind us with the 2-point clearance that we have at the top of the table. I want to talk a little bit here, Maka, about Arsenal and Spurs. I will raise my hand and say I have been called and fairly called out as a Spurs apologist on this podcast and at times in our Discord channels. But for someone who always has a hair across his ass for Arsenal, mainly because I really can't stand Mikel Arteta, I find it funny that so many people want to just bury Spurs and what they're doing and like their progression and their build, right? Yet want to just find excuses to convince themselves that Arsenal are turning corners and are at the top. I would argue that Mikel Arteta getting Declan Rice and having it work so well, signing the player you need, yet not taking the step forward, is 100% more of a detriment to Arsenal than it is Tottenham, who is forced to sell the best player maybe the club's ever had with less than 48 hours to go in a transfer window, and somehow figuring out a way with a new coach to still be within touching distance of the top 4, 20 matches in. Yet somehow people are still making statements in England of how Arsenal are still contenders and Tottenham has a lot to worry about. If I were those two clubs, I think I'd much rather be Tottenham right now than I would Arsenal.
I would agree. And I'm not just saying that because it's Big Ange, but he has a plan, and it's possibly a flawed plan, but it's one that all the players know. Nevertheless, Mikel Arteta almost reminds me less of Pep Guardiola and more of Arsene Wenger, where Arsene Wenger, he really polished up when he first came in, like Arsenal players' technical skills, like just simple passing and receiving the ball, passing with both feet, receiving across both sides of your body. Like Tony Adams has spoken about that a lot of times, about how it was just different training and it was almost very basic training. But then he went and trusted his players to go out and do that. And then when he got players like Henry and Petit and Mark Overmars and all that, who were already conversant with playing like that one-touch technical football, that kind of took over. But tactically, they weren't fantastic. They were just going to outplay it. Like, and if they couldn't do that, if you had a plan against them, you were in trouble. For Spurs, Big Ange is about that pressing game, just much like Klopp, and you can tell his players love playing for him. Like I don't get that love with Arteta. I think Arteta is a bit fake. If you go by that Arsenal Amazon documentary thing, he's a bit showy. He's a bit like new wave. Like here's the latest motivational thing that I've read in a book. Whereas Big Ange is just, all right, mate. He's just a bloke that happens to manage a team. Just like Jurgen Klopp is a bloke who happens to manage a team, and
guy you want to have a beer with.
Yeah,
guy you want to have a beer with at the pub. Both
Yeah.
of them, clearly.
And I said this in the Discord as well. Jose Mourinho wasn't a tactically fantastic manager during his great run of success, but his players loved him because like John Terry always said, he's the biggest practical joker at Chelsea in a culture that like where practical joking and hazing was still a thing. Like, he was the worst one for doing it. So he knew already, get your players on side with you and you can take them places they never thought they were going to go. I think Mikel Arteta is probably too technical minded. He's probably too like, this is how we're going to play the game. We're going to do this and tappy, and then we're going to go here. Whereas Big Ange probably puts his arm around the players that didn't play so well and tells them they're the best thing since sliced bread and the next game's going to be better. So when they come out in the next game, they're going to hit hard and they're going to run hard again, just like Klopp does every week. We may not win the game last week, but we're going to run hard next week because you guys are great at that and I love you for it. And so that's what they go in. So I think I would much rather be a Spurs player right now than an Arsenal player, mostly because I don't want to have to look at a Lego head 5 hours a day, but also because I just think Mikel Arteta, if he doesn't get the technical part right, I don't think he has much to help his players out. That's going to motivate them to come back next week and try and do something. That's where the bottling thing comes from. Like Spurs are Spursy, but Arsenal are bottlers. They're proper bottlers, and they always have been.
Right.
And I don't think he helps that.
Did it less than 12 months ago, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting here, too. We talk about it. If you were Arsenal, if you were a supporter of either team, or if you're a neutral, right, and you're watching these two teams play, who are you going to gravitate more towards? I hate saying it like this because sometimes regular people, this is how their minds work, right? Like you're going to gravitate more towards the effervescent smile of Son Heung-min compared to the vitriol smirk and disdain of Gabriel Jesus. And I know it'll make Demuchin laugh to hear, me whining about Gabriel Jesus's, bitchy whiny face. But like, I think sometimes that predicates through your team. They see how you act at the top. They see how you act as like the leader. And Arsenal doesn't have it. I think Odegaard is arguably right now, outside of Kevin De Bruyne, maybe the most talented midfielder in all the Premier League. I think he is KDB level. I will go that far. He looks lost at that club. They don't, and he's their captain.
If you remember, sorry for stepping over there, but if you remember last year, I said Odegaard is not a great captain. I didn't understand why they made him a captain. He just doesn't have that aura about him. He's a great player. And I think there was a time when he was almost talked about as a Liverpool player when he was younger, and he went to Madrid instead. But he's a fantastic player. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but he's not a captain.
Well, here's the thing: we as Liverpool supporters have ripped on all season long, Manchester United's decision to keep Bruno Fernandes as captain. The idea that Arsenal spent $100+ million on Declan Rice, signed a guy who captained a West Ham team to a European trophy, and didn't make him the captain of the club after spending $100 million on him, instead of having a finesse Norwegian winger basically be their captain. Like, it just lets you know they don't really understand what's happening. Because Declan Rice is the best leader at Arsenal. When Arsenal is playing best is when Declan Rice looks really, really good and is playing well. Like, it makes no sense. And I'm a huge fan of Odegaard, but I couldn't agree with you more. This is where I think this top half of the table, it comes down to two teams, people. There are two teams that can win the Premier League title, in my opinion, this year. And they're the two teams who have won the Premier League title over the last 6 years. and it's Manchester City and Liverpool.
I think I agree, and I think people neutrals would like the romance of Aston Villa. But I want to see them get into the top four just for Unai Emery alone. I think it's a nice middle finger up to Arsenal for somebody who, again, his players clearly love playing for him. Like he's not an overly technical man.
He was a better manager. He actually earned more points per match over his first 40 matches at Arsenal than Arteta did. But he got no time because he could barely speak English, and he kept his mouth open when he did interviews, but he refused to use a translator because he wanted to prove he was trying. And because of it, the fucking media in London ran him out. And I'll be honest with you, I think Arteta's done a better job than I thought he could at that club, because I thought he was a joke. I'll raise my hand and say I thought he was a bad manager, a bad hire. I thought they should have fired him at times last year, and I was probably wrong. Like I'll be fair, right? I'll be real. Unai Emery is head and shoulders a football tactician and people manager, to be honest, than Arteta will be for years to come. He might get there. To be fair, he's proven some positive nature around him. And he's not, he's not the problem that is happening, at United. He's not Ten Hag. He doesn't have an arrogance. I think he actually supports his players. He wants them to be great. But when it all comes down to it, for me, when I look at this table, the number one thing I see, there's a consistency at the top. And it's not just because they haven't dropped a match in their last 5. They easily could have beaten Arsenal, as we know, with the handball possibly against Odegaard, the 2 or 3 different missed big opportunities that we had as well. There have been points we have dropped throughout the year. But more importantly, I think we are at a point where we are playing the most consistent football of anyone in all of England. And I do think there is a little bit of value in the fact that we're in the Europa League. Everybody thinks that's a harder Thursday, Sunday. We've pretty much figured out we can do that. We are rotating well. I think we have a much deeper side. So I think we can continue to go hard in Europa and still compete in the league. What it comes down to here for me is that there are a couple sides here, Newcastle, Chelsea, Brighton, that maybe are a little below their level. West Ham maybe punching a little above their level. If I asked you out of this top 10 right now, which of those sides between 6 and 10 has the best chance to fight their way back into a top 4 challenge?
I'd actually go say West Ham. I think there's a confidence about Moyes now that, like, they're talking about giving him a new contract and everything like that. Like, the players are buying into him, and they're getting results. I think Brighton are maybe a stretch too far for them this season. It eventually come up, catch up with them. How's I think it's gone at the end of the season at Newcastle. I just don't. I think they'll look at what he does, him and his puppet. And then, and I love Eddie Howe's. I think he is a very good coach, but I don't think he was ready for that responsibility right now. I think he needed a bridging club to get there. Like, maybe if he gone to Celtic after Brendan Rodgers and won a few trophies there, it would be different for him. Chelsea, they're just so up and down. It's just hard to tell with them. They're going to be great looking one week and then horrible the next. And United, they're not going to slip down to the relegation zone, but they're just, as if you have Bruno Fernandes as your captain, you deserve every bad fortune that comes towards you, and it's going to continue to get worse until they sweep the decks completely. Almost, like, I don't think there's any redeeming features in that club right now. So I think out from 6 to 10, I think West Ham are the most consistent and the most well structured to fight for a top 4 place, and probably with Tottenham and Arsenal. I don't see Aston Villa having any momentous drop. I think Aston Villa are probably going to be the 3rd or 4th place team. I can't see that changing.
So I expect 5 teams, obviously, to the Premier League's Champions League places based on the new format next year. I think there will be 5 sides going into the Champions League. So if you gave me the top 5, I would tell you I think West Ham has a really, really good chance of being in the top 5 by the end of the season. I think West Ham is actually just as good as Aston Villa, but I don't think they're managed as well. Now, I think they're managed better for their club. Like, I think David Moyes is the Premier League manager of the year, to be honest, over the last, 5 years at West Ham. Because 2 years he kept them up. 1 year he got them to play Barcelona in the Europa League. And the next year, he got them to – he won a European trophy, people. And they just won their group in the Europa League. Everyone's like, oh, Brighton, they're having a bad year because they're being forced to play in the Europa League. West Ham's being forced to play in the Europa League without a Europa League qualifying side, and they won their group. I don't think Moyes gets enough credit. But I'll say this. If I were a West Ham supporter, I'd be on the Tom Rennie bandwagon that I want him replaced. Because if they had if they had the Bournemouth manager right now, Anduani or whatever the hell his name is, with the talent West Ham has, they'd be pushing forward in the league and in Europe. Because I think they actually have the talent to move a step forward. And the problem is they're probably going to give an extension to a manager who wants to hold them right where they are, which is compete for Europe every year, make the knockout rounds, and if we win a trophy, it's good. And I think that's the difference. I think Brighton looks for the manager who not only wants to make a run in Europe, wants to also try to be Leicester and win the Premier League in the season. If all the things come together, De Zerbi's going for it all. If all the things come together, David Moyes is probably still looking for a draw on the road.
I think that Moyes is the perfect Everton manager. That's the thing. That's the best thing you can say about him, because those are all Everton ambitions: challenge for Europe, stay in the league. Maybe if a trophy comes along, that'd be great. They're happy with that. West Ham fans, at least, are still a little bit delusional that they could have that great team from the 60s all over again.
But shouldn't they be? But shouldn't they be when they win a European trophy, and then the next year they're within punching distance of the top 4? 2 years ago they were within punching distance of the top 4, and they play in a stadium in the middle of London that can hold 70,000 people. Shouldn't they actually believe they should be better than punching for the team from the 60s? I guess that's what drives me nuts sometimes when I hear how teams are like, well, they should just be happy for who they are. I feel like West Ham's at a period right now with Jared Bowen and this Mohamed Kudus and Paqueta. They should be looking at things saying, we have a better playing side than Manchester United. Why aren't we going for things? And why is our manager trying to draw on the road at Forest? And I think that's where, if I were a West Ham supporter, I would never say Moyes out because he won you a European fucking trophy. But don't you have to say, Moyes up? Can't we move him into the director's box and find a young, progressive man? Would Marco Silva from Fulham not give West Ham a better chance in Europe over the next 2 years or 3 years if he was coaching them than maybe David Moyes?
I see the problem with that kind of thinking is I think he would need the 3 years to get the team to play the way he wants them to play, and that's what they want. They want to not risk, because Moyes has them where they are now. They don't want to start again. I think for West Ham, the best thing that could happen is that Brendan Rodgers gets fed up at Celtic not getting any players again, which is exactly what seems to be happening. So he leaves. Moyes goes to Celtic because now he knows what it's like to be in Europe and he likes it. He's an ex-Celtic player, so they would have him as well. And then he could win a league, and then he could say he's a win and get into the Champions League, and then get trashed, but expected to be trashed in the Champions League, and then West Ham get to move on for somebody else. Probably Brendan Rodgers, actually, the way it worked. That's what they'd probably end up doing. But I think West Ham's next manager probably needs to be an Unai Emery, actually, somebody who has a point to prove, to see what they have and then move on from there, rather than to come in and say, I'm changing everything because this is the style of play I want. Look, Jose Mourinho would actually probably be great for West Ham right now in terms of getting them to win more things.
Jose Mourinho is great for everyone in the Premier League or in the media, because it means you get to cover Jose Mourinho.
That's true.
But the truth of the matter is, as anyone who's watched Italian football for the last 2 seasons knows, he's pretty much done.
Oh, yeah, him and Rafa, like that whole generation of coaches, they're finished in terms of their effectiveness. But in terms of taking Moyes' team and bringing them on from what Moyes is to something a little bit better, a manager like him would be the least disruptive. Nuno probably would have been the better option because he's a quite defensive counter-attacking manager, but he wants to win games. He's not playing for the draw. He just thinks defending first is the way to get the wins. But I think you nailed Moyes right on the head there. Moyes he's like Hodgson. As long as he doesn't lose, he's done his job. There's no ambition to win. There's no let's take 4 defenders off and throw 3 midfielders and a striker on, and then see if we can get this win in the last 5 minutes. Let's put 10 more defenders on.
He puts on the 5th defender with an attempt to solidify, so maybe we might hit him on the counter if they make a mistake.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he takes off the striker to put in the 5th defender.
Actually, he takes off his most speedy winger.
Yeah.
For the 5th defender. So we look at the bottom of the table. Sheffield United, Burnley, and Luton. Big surprise. 3 teams who came up sitting right down in that relegation zone. We can all laugh about Everton, but if we don't take away 10 points from them, they're sitting securely in 12th right now at 26 points and nowhere near it. So what is it that is even intriguing about the bottom of this table? Is there anything that changes any of this? Or are the 3 teams who came up that are the ones who just go right back down?
Save for another points deduction for Everton, I think the bottom 3 are the bottom 3 for the rest of the season, and they're the ones going down. Sheffield United reappointing Chris Wilder is probably not designed to keep them up, but designed to get them challenging next year in the Championship because he knows it so well. Burnley, did great getting up and all that stuff, but it's just yet another example of the quality of the player's career doesn't necessarily dictate the quality of the player's coaching career. Company had some good ideas and some good sound bites, but the reality is he's not able to motivate the team to play beyond their capabilities, so they're going to go back down because he doesn't have the players for the Premier League.
Well, they didn't. I was just going to say they didn't actually give him any. They didn't help him.
No, they didn't. No.
And I think his problem is he has a coaching philosophy that is we're going to play football, because I think he actually believes in himself to believe he gets more jobs. Like, I think he thinks he gets a job in the Premier League next year, even if they get sent down. I'm not sure about that, by the way. Like, if I were him, I'd be ready to coach in the Championship next year again, if he goes down. And from all accounts, it sounds like he's very, very committed to Burnley, and he loves the people of Burnley, and they've been good to him as a club. So maybe he'll stick it out with them, which I always think is really cool when managers like yo-yo with clubs up and down, because it shows their dedication to the club. Sean Dyche did it. We all loved him or poke fun at Sean Dyche on this podcast, right? But people forget, Sean Dyche got sent down twice with Burnley and brought them back. You know what that means? You're a good fucking manager.
I like Sean Dyche.
No, but I know you do. But my point is, if your club sends you down and lets you bring them back, you're a good manager. If they let you do it twice, you're such a good manager. They know they can't get better than you. Let's be real. Burnley only fired Sean Dyche because they actually thought with the new manager bounce, they might actually fucking stay up. They might have stayed up. If they had stayed up that year, they would have rehired Sean Dyche. Yeah. Let's be real. Let's not fucking kid ourselves. Like, they love that man. There are still people at Burnley who feel like they're like Everton has got a path on them because they have that red-headed, gruff, angry-voiced man. And he is a man of men. Like, I don't like the man, but I respect the man. That's for goddamn sure. And I'll say it till the day is long. Like, if I played for him, I'd run through a wall for him. And if you wouldn't run through that wall for him, you'd probably pull out a razor and slice him. Because it's one or the other, right? Like, it's one or the other when it comes to a man like this. So, who here, if anyone, is pulled into that bottom three? If Luton or Burnley can go on a run, is it Brentford? Is it Forest? Is it Palace? Is it Everton? What club gets pulled into this relegation battle if we ever get one?
I'm gonna say Palace. Because there's already the rumors of Hodgson being replaced with Steve Cooper from Forest, which means that he's going to start lashing out because he does that because he gets paranoid, and then he's going to start lashing out at the players. So whatever relationship he's built up with them is going to collapse, and they're just going to give up. And that's where Crystal Palace get dropped into it. Just looking at there now, 2 draws and 2 losses in the last 4. And I think, I admire the fact that at nearly 80 years of age, he's coming back into the game to manage that. That's an admirable thing. I hope I have that kind of energy and drive at that age. I also hope I don't have that negative outlook that Roy Hodgson has at that age, or any age for that matter. But I think his tolerance for anything is low at this point. He knows who he is. He knows what he's about, and he's quite prepared to say things that, like grumpy old granddad, he's going to shake his fist at the clouds of the media and his own players. So if any team out of that bottom half gets sucked into the bottom 3 race, I think it's going to be Palace. I think because I think Frank's going to do okay with Brentford. Everton, they're just doing really well outside of the points deduction. And Forest have got Nuno now, so they're going to start pushing up a little bit out of new manager bounce than anything else. But Hodgson is always a reducing factor for any club he's at when things go against them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Trevor here, where he says, without Emblemo, Brentford has looked really poor. Also, they are almost guaranteed to cash in on Tony once he's reinstated. I worry a little bit about Brentford. I will say Forest, if you take away those back-to-back wins that they just got between Man United and Newcastle United, which I don't think anyone would have lined them up to get, they would be sitting firmly right now 1 point below Luton Town. But I do agree with you. I think Nuno makes them a little bit more stable. We're going into a new transfer window, so who knows? Before we know it, Forest might sign 30 more fullbacks. So they may have a whole another type of side. I think Palace is a little bit in trouble. I think the fact that they have Elise and Eze back right now, healthy, lets you think they can score. I've said it before. I expect Everton to get at least half, if not more, of the points back when they actually get to appeal. I think what they were docked in 10 points was ludicrous. It was like a 2 to 3 point deduction tops. They took 10 away from them. And I think that was part of the league trying to play off the City and
yeah, they're trying to cover up for City for doing absolutely nothing about that egregious load of nonsense.
Well, I think if you can get 10 against Everton, right? And then if you then barter the 10 and you bring it down to 4, when you make it 80 against City, you can bring that down to 60. And it makes it, I think the league knows what they're doing. And I think we're going to hear about Chelsea will be the next club, in my opinion, that is found at guilty and fault, even though City's charges came up before them, even though Everton's charges came up after Chelsea's. Because I think what they're doing is they're setting themselves up for penalty-based response. And then penalty and response, knowing that you're going to get appeals and wins. Because I think they're trying to make sure that when City appeals and wins, because they will win, right? We know that. It's not so much that it's a slap on the wrist. See, I think they're trying to set precedent so that when City has to fight their appeal, the precedent is still enough to actually make a change and hopefully deter other clubs from doing this in the future. And I really think that's why Everton got smashed, because we've never seen anything for the type of charges Everton were up at. No one's ever had that type of penalty brought down on them. And that only makes sense when you have two other clubs with worse egregious offenses hanging over them that will require a penalty and a reduction. So let's get into it here. We start that silly ass season. It started today. We're not going to talk a lot about it now because we're going to wrap up here in the next few minutes. But I'm going to ask you now, Maka, does Liverpool do anything incoming or outcoming during the month of January in the transfer market?
I think a right back possibly. I think if Robertson and Tsimikas are both, Robertson is supposed to come back soonish, but I saw somewhere that maybe Tsimikas might be out for longer. If that's the case, I don't know whether they'll buy another left back because they'll be stuck with 3 left backs, but we are short of right backs. If we're going to have Gomez as a floating defender and Trent as the not only a nominal right back who jumps into the midfield, I think they're going to want to look at maybe somebody to come in on the cheap. We're not going to splash out for Cafu or anything like that. But somebody who can fill a slot if needed, if something happens to Gomez. So we could see that. And then maybe somebody up front, if Salah is going to be leaving at the end of the season, I think we need a Salah replacement. So maybe a pre-contract or something like that, or a pre-agreement. I know the rumors were all Mbappe wants to come to Liverpool, but I don't know whether we can afford Mbappe at all.
Even if we could, I don't know that I can handle it. I don't know that I can handle the drama.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I could see, a talismanic replacement being signed to something beforehand. Somebody that we're going to know the name of, and we're going to be excited for them next June. Not necessarily right now, unless something happens horribly to Salah at the African nations right off the bat. In which case, Klopp doesn't tend to panic. He tends to say, we're going to bring that player coming in June.
I can't remember a single player ever being signed because of an injury, to be honest.
Yeah.
Really. I think if we were going to make a move, I think we could see some outgoings. I think there could be some loan players. Obviously Carvalho comes back on loan from RB Leipzig. I strongly expect him to go out either on another loan, if not a permanent sale. Personally, if someone came in with a profitable offer, if someone offered $20 million right now for Carvalho, I'd sell him. I just don't believe he's going to ever. I think if a guy comes in and goes out on loan in the first year at Liverpool, and Klopp basically makes like multiple comments about your attitude at times in passing, odds are you're probably more Mamadou Sakho than you are, Divock Origi. Like
Yeah.
Divock Origi is the only player to ever come back, and Harvey Elliott, to be fair, but Harvey Elliott was sent out on an actual like, we want you to get minutes, play some loan, and you'll have a player. Divock Origi was sent out on a loan by Klopp. Like, I don't want you, I don't need you, go. And he still rebuilt himself to find a role on the side. But there are very few of those, in my opinion, in Klopp's career, where he sends a player out on loan as a senior player and he comes back with a big future. So to me, if Leicester City, if Fulham, if somebody comes in with like a real number that profits on Carvalho, he goes. Bye. Like, move on, best of days. It's funny, there's talk Arsenal might be in for Solanke, which would be great because Liverpool gets 20% of whatever Bournemouth sells him for, which is outstanding. I mean, let's be honest. If I actually thought we needed a striker right now or a fifth attacking option, I'd be like, why wouldn't we rebuy the guy? He looks every bit of the part we need. But it doesn't work. We had him. It didn't work out. So move forward. I think the biggest thing for this side right now, I don't think they'll sign a right back. I don't. They called Owen back from loan today as well, which is interesting, which makes me think maybe they have a little bit less confidence in in Tsimikas or Robertson actually being back later this month / early next month. The fact they called Owen Beck back from his, what has been a very good loan for him, starting almost every single match at left back at a top flight level, that feels to me like they feel like, to your point, they think they need some more cover to cover on the right as well. Because Gomez is going to have, we got League Cup games, we got FA Cup games coming. Like, that's the thing. Like, next Thursday, folks, we're going to be back. We're going to wrap this thing up now, but I just want to mention, obviously, as we continue to prepare here for the second half of the season, please go over to the YouTube page, subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to have a lot of content coming out in the next 6 to 12 months on all of our avenues, whether it be on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. So please give it a like, give it a subscribe. If you want to get involved, go ahead and send us a message. The reason I mention this is that we have tons of matches coming in January. We have a ton of FA Cup, League Cup. So we're going to have more of these pre-match shows, post-match shows, our podcasts. We want to get as many folks involved as possible. I think the rotation is going to start to be something that is going to become more and more of a point of our emphasis, Maka, when we do these shows, because I think the importance of having fresh legs and having guys who have fresh minds probably to actually act out the manager's wishes. It's probably even more important. I think that's what you see when you see when a Pep side becomes like broken, they start making all kinds of mistakes. And I think we see that too with Klopp. I think these guys are so maniacal and so demanding mentally on what they expect from their players that when they're short and they're actually caused to play more minutes and practice harder and do all these things, I think that's when they start to let down in the small moments, and then we start to see the frailties. And I think that's why it's so important that we ultimately make some I don't want to say strengthening moves like buy new players, but we make moves where we actually rotate better, where we're playing players, where we give guys the ability to start from the beginning with fresh minds and fresh thoughts that give them the ability to have fresh legs and be great all match, which is why I want to see Elliott get a start here and there, and Soboslai get starts here and there, and McAllister get starts, and a little bit more rotation. So we're going to get out of here on this. Over the next 4 weeks, for you, barring the fact that we will most likely be without Endo and Mo, what is the most important aspect
for the next
success?
I think I think it would be just to not overly rely on one player for the goals, because now we can't just look to somebody else to replace Salah. Now it's going to be everybody else has to step up, and if it means we have 10 different goal scorers over 4 weeks, but we win the games, then that's it. No one player has to take the mantle on, which means Nunez now doesn't have to change the way he plays. Now he doesn't have to say, I'm the man now, I got to get the goals, and then he misses 20 shots and everybody's on his back again. And then the other thing is we just have to look probably on the same level as make sure that whoever's taking Endo's role does what Endo has been doing, which is just keep it tidy at the back. There's no need to be doing anything fancy, because that he doesn't, and he brings so much success to us in that sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think honestly the number one thing is build on what Endo has left, which is keep it simple, stupid. It
like
ain't
this
that hard. Literally, just keep it simple, right? Like keep it simple. It isn't that hard. It's a KISS mentality for Endo. He doesn't do anything that brings him outside of his own comfort zones. And when he does, he usually picks up a yellow card. And it's been a couple of weeks since he's done that, so I appreciate it. I think on the other side of it, it is exactly what you're saying. It's the top of the pitch. It's the spear. It's not putting too much pressure on Nunez to feel he has to do everything. And I think that's what Klopp, once again, his man management is just so top-notch. Is I think him playing him more and more with Gakpo over the last few weeks was to give him comfort into the fact that he doesn't have to do everything, but that he can still make contributions from the left, from the right, from where he is. It's going to be interesting to me to see what they do when Jota and Diaz are asked to do more without Mo. But again, I'll come back to what I said in the pre-match, and I think I said it in the middle of the Discord channel. I expect Jota to play the least amount of minutes between now and when Mo comes back. I expect him to score the most amount of goals and arguably be the most important player at the club for the entire time. And at the end of the season, if we are lucky enough at the end of May against Wolves to lift the trophy at Anfield with actual supporters in the crowd, once again, people will probably forget exactly how important Diego Jota has been at this club. You know who won't forget it? The away supporters who still sing his name every single time he runs up and down the pitch around them, because they understand exactly how great a player he is. So up to Jota, up to Liverpool, up 2024. For myself and Maka, please like the page, subscribe to the YouTube, do the things, all the stuff. Tell people you love it. If you don't like it, well, keep your opinion to yourself. And if not, have a great night. And we're going to see you all really soon.